and consciousness out of a material substructure. And I find that totally awe-inspiring.
Does it pose, and I know when I've spoken to people who do hold to a strictly creationist account, one of the problems they have is that it throws up possible problems for Christian theology over things like original sin, or, if we're talking about the fall, which is pictured in Genesis as Adam and Eve being excluded from the garden because they sin. You can't sort of have that account in evolution because it's such, at some point, if you're saying humans evolved and became conscious, or it's very hard to pinpoint, there was a first Adam and Eve or something. I mean, how would you go about reconciling those kinds of aspects of Christian theology with the evolutionary account?
Well, again, I would just say that Genesis account is a symbolic account. It's an account of how human beings... I mean, the existentialist philosophers have put it very well, I think, that what Genesis is talking about is the estrangement of human beings from knowledge of God and love of God. I should point out, of course, that not all Christians believe in original sin.
No, indeed.
None of the Eastern Orthodox churches believe in original sin, and so it's a purely Western phenomenon, which comes from Augustine. But you might want to say, and again, I don't think you have to be religious to say this, there must have been a time at which the first moral awareness appeared on the planet Earth. And you might want to say that with that growth of moral awareness came a sense of being unable to do what was right. I mean, a sense of guilt or a sense of inadequacy. So you can give an evolutionary account of the development of morality, and people are trying to do that with a certain amount of success. But I should say, of course, the growth of morality is another big problem for evolutionary biology. You might want to say we could, in principle, come to an account of how morality developed, but nobody is agreed about exactly what that process is. So in evolution, which I accept the scientific account of evolution, I see the problem of consciousness, the development of consciousness, the problem of the development of morality, and the development of a sense of God, which people like me claim to have, as big problems. That's not to say they have no solution, but to say evolution is not a theory which is all settled and we know what it is and there are no problems. And I'm focusing on the problems and saying, well, there are a number of open alternatives for these problems. And I think God's a good hypothesis.
Now, here we see we're getting into what's called the God of the gaps. Science can't explain it yet, so God must be the explanation. So what happens here? If science finds an explanation, Keith will say, well, that's all right, because God put the scientific laws in place.
Don't tell me what I'd say, Robert.
Well, that's exactly what you are saying for things like natural selection.
No, I'm not saying I'm bringing God into a gap. I completely deny the idea of the God of the gaps. The expression, of course, was invented by a Methodist scientist.
But you said there are problems in evolutionary biology, and God is a good hypothesis for answering them.
It's not as I've said before. God is not a scientific hypothesis.
Well, is he an explanation?
Yes, I think there can be philosophical explanations, but now it's a different sense of explanation. I think what's going on here is that you're limiting explanations to the sorts of things that evolutionary biologists can come up with. I'm all for those explanations, but I don't think they provide ultimate answers to the question, why is the universe the way it is?